So bringing this closer to home, tonight your local congressmen up for re-election are reacting to today's major developments. We caught up with Senator Tim Kaine, who calls this a, quote, big game-changing moment. The Democrat says it proves the Robert Mueller investigation into alleged Russian meddling needs to be preserved. We also asked if he thinks this will have implications on the midterm election.
I think the corruption of the administration and the administration supporters is going to be a significant issue that people will worry about in the midterms, and they will worry about letting a team with that level of corruption sort of have the unchecked control of everything.
Now, on the other side, Republican Congressman Scott Taylor says the legal and political implications of this have yet to be seen. He says he'd like to see the Mueller investigation wrapped up as soon as possible. Now, amid all of this, he says he stays focused on his specific district and the issues at hand. Here's his thoughts on what he thinks about if this will affect the election.
There's an overestimation a lot of times how national issues affect local races, and an underestimation of the local politics all the time. So could it have an effect in some regard? Possibly. Do I think it's going to have an effect on this race? No.
And we also reached out to Democratic congressional candidate Elaine Luria and Republican candidate for Senate Corey Stewart to get their reactions to today's decisions, but we haven't heard back.